Okay, welcome to the Lovecraft eZine video talk show. Today is Sunday, July the 19th, 2015. And today on the show we have author Peter Clines. And welcome to the show, Peter. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Pete Clines is the author of 14 brand new science fiction novel, The Fold, which appears to me is doing extremely well. A series called X Heroes, if I have that right, which I need to read because it looks awesome. I stumbled onto Peter Clines through his novel 14, so which we don't want to reveal anything about that plot really, except to say that if you're a Lovecraft fan, you're going to enjoy the book. So let's put it that way. So anyway, Peter, let's talk about The Fold first.
Sure.
I've heard it's set in the same universe as 14, but you don't necessarily need to read one or the other to enjoy them both. Is that right?
Yeah, it's kind of like if you think of on TV Flash and Arrow or Buffy and Angel, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, that sort of thing. That they're in the same universe, but they're both standalone books. So it's not really sequels. It's like Iron Man and Thor, not Iron Man and Iron Man 2, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So some similar names and things, but.
So what's kind of the spoiler? We do these mostly spoiler free in most of these shows, so today's spoiler free. What's the basic synopsis plot of The Fold? What's the idea behind it?
The Fold revolves around a guy by the name of Mike, who Mike has a lot of gifts he's been denying for most of his life, and he's kind of more or less living in hiding. And one of his oldest friends hunts him down and basically says, "Look, I've got this job, and you're the best person to do it." And it turns out his friend works for DARPA, and DARPA has been funding a teleportation project which actually works.
Oh, wow.
But the catch is the scientists behind it, even though it's worked, they've proven it, they've tested it, the scientists don't want to release it yet. And they don't want any publicity for it. And basically his friend is asking him, can you go out there and find out what the hell is going on? So that's the very basic premise. And if we've learned anything from sci-fi and horror, we know any story with teleportation, just there's always going to be bad side effects. So.
Yeah, none of those guys watched The Fly, so they're working on this project.
Or read the Jaunt.
What'd you say, Pete?
Or read the Jaunt.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Or saw Star Trek 1 with the transporter accident, or so many things.
You know what? That brings up a question. I want to ask you this. This is going to be confusing because we have two Petes here today. Pete Clines, the guest. One Star Trek novel I read, but you can answer too, Pete, probably. One Star Trek novel that I read, I forget who it was, but he's from the past. He's suddenly introduced to all this Star Trek technology, and when it comes to the teleporter that he used to go down to the planets and so forth, he says something to the effect of, "You guys have no respect for human life because every time you teleport someone, you're basically killing them and copying them exactly when you teleport them to the new place." So. What's your thoughts on that? I just think that's a fascinating concept.
Wasn't
book.
That's Rogue Moon, isn't it? The basic premise of that old sci-fi novel is that teleportation kills you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But you get to but you're a perfect copy, so does it matter that you killed somebody?
So. I think there was an episode of the new Outer Limits in which there was an alien species that controlled teleportation. And you had to die, but once you were teleported, the end process killed you. And in the episode, somebody actually survives. Well, now there's two of them, one very, very far away and one right there. And the aliens are dead set on just shooting this guy in the head, calling it a day, because that's the rules. You can't have two of you in the universe.
Well, you're reminding me of the movie, I think it was a novel originally, The Prestige, where Nikola
Yep.
Tesla invents a teleportation which clones you.
Right.
Yeah. I just thought of that too. Yeah.
Yes.
I
That's
actually just
Christopher Lee.
Sorry, Pete, go
it's
ahead.
a no. It's I actually just finished reading The Kiln People by David Brin, and that's one of the big elements in that is that the whole idea is about how the world is changed by a technology that lets you make a 24-hour duplicate of yourself.
Right. Quick clones.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Hmm.
But even just teleportation, I am always wanting to write a story with teleportation. And my husband, who's a big sci-fi writer and editor, tells me teleportation is a disruptive technology. You cannot write teleportation.
You're not allowed?
Well, he says it would fundamentally change everything. So there's just too much to account for.
Well, I think you can.
Go ahead, Pete, sorry.
Oh no. I was just thinking it was funny because when you were saying that, I was thinking of I think it was on Deep Space Nine, which I know I might piss people off by saying this. Deep Space Nine was always my favorite Star Trek show. Because well, because I think it got much more into this is the real day by day of living in the Federation, and there was a great reference once that people essentially get like transporter credits. So talking about disruptive, how it would change everything. There was this little story. It wasn't even a flashback, just two people talking about how when Sisko was at Starfleet Academy in San Francisco, every night he would go home to New Orleans for dinner. Because you could literally just be there like that. And I thought, what a bizarre and yet cool idea that everywhere on Earth is next to each other. And like we were saying for disruptive, what does that do for, commerce? What does that do for relationships? What does that do for everything?
Price of gasoline. You don't need to drive anywhere anymore. You don't need to fly.
And
Exactly.
one of the premises of, Fall of Hyperion by Dan Simmons is when you have technology like that suddenly fails. What do you do when your house is really on 3 different planets? And all of a sudden you're stuck in the bathroom because everything else is gone.
But that's like any good post-apocalypse story is about, okay, we don't have gasoline anymore. It is whenever you have that fundamental technology that you've built your whole society around, and then that fails.
Yeah. But disruptive technology. The funny thing is that technically the Learjet was a disruptive technology. It killed the Concorde because it allowed for very small groups of people to travel from one metropolitan area to another metropolitan area without going through hubs. That's technically what killed the Concorde. The internet killed DVD players, or VHS and Blockbuster. The internet is a disruptive technology. They're all around us. We just have to play with them, see what comes next. What's going to kill you?
Well, that's what I think.
Yeah, this video chat's a good example too, where it's the next best thing to being in the same room. We're on a screen, but this is pretty cool.
We're spread all over the country, I'm guessing, yes?
And the world.
The
Don,
planet.
you're in London, aren't you?
No.
I'm in Spain right now.
Spain, I'm sorry, that's right.
Okay. You're in Spain, I'm in California, I'm in
Florida.
I'm in New York.
Texas, unfortunately. Still on the fold a little bit. This protagonist, I read an interview where he's super, super smart, and I'm first of all really looking forward to reading this, because I really enjoyed 14, and the concept behind the fold sounds very interesting to me. But let me just quote. This is you, Pete. Seriously, though, I've always been fascinated by super intelligence stories. I've always liked the Doctor Who type characters who can outsmart their opponents rather than outshoot or outpunch them. Batman and so forth. Can you comment on that? It's always fascinated me as well. Those types
That's
of
just I when I was growing up, the big sci-fi thing at the time was Doctor Who runs out of Boston. I grew up in New England, and it always struck me that that was the big thing with the Doctor. That it was a sci-fi show with a sci-fi action hero who didn't have a ray gun, didn't have a killer android, all this stuff. That he literally just outthought people again and again and again. And with the new series, I've enjoyed that even more. That so much of it has been about that isn't the final solution for him most of the time. But I don't know. I've always loved it. Sorry, Rick.
Yes, who was your first Doctor?
Oh, Tom Baker.
Okay.
Yeah, WGBH out of Boston had like a big block that was I want to say the first 6 seasons of Tom Baker, and they just replayed it again and again and again to the point that I knew every single one of them. And it was this huge thing when they finally got the Key to Time saga. So we had like one more season of Doctor Who to watch, and then it would go back to the beginning of the loop again. So,
yeah, go ahead.
well, no, just but yeah, I always found something kind of interesting about that, and it was kind of gelled years back. When I first moved to California, I had this little tiny apartment, and I went to the laundromat down the street, and somebody had left an issue of GQ down there that I was paging through, openly, freely admitting because it had Charlize Theron on the cover. But there was this fantastic article that they'd done this series of interviews with a ton of high IQ people, and it was very interesting seeing how all of them viewed the world, where they all fit into it, and I mean, we all think about, wow, how much better would it be if I was better at math, if I could do this, if I could figure that out. And we all kind of think it's like this instant ticket to greatness. And it was amazing how many of them were still in B-level jobs doing, I don't want to say next to nothing with their lives because they were all accomplishing things on their own level. But I mean, like one of the guys lived in a little crap apartment in Brooklyn with furniture that he'd basically scavenged out of the alley, and made his whole living doing IQ tests online for people. And that was it. That was what this guy did. And he had I think at the time, the 5th highest rated IQ in the country. And that's what he was doing.
I was talking with my wife. We've had this conversation several times. You know that saying, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king? I don't know that that's true. I think in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is frustrated as hell, at times. Because other people can't see what maybe seems so obvious to him.
Yeah, and in the kingdom of the blind, all the books are in Braille. So
right. Yeah, good point.
But yeah, so that always struck me. And the other thing that is another part of Mike's makeup, Mike actually has a true sci-fi photographic memory, which is something I had to do a bit of research on this because really photographic memory doesn't exist, or at least they've never been able to prove it exists in any scientific, quantifiable way. There are different forms of extreme memory. There's, and I always butcher the pronunciation of this, eidetic memory, which is very much about images. And I thought, okay, if Mike actually had the sort of sci-fi Reed Richards, Doctor Who photographic memory that we all sort of like to pretend exists, what would it really be like? What would it do to someone who could actually remember everything? And so doing that became a big part of his character and helped shape the novel a lot. It also became one of the biggest challenges because really, until I started working on this, I didn't realize how often you can fall back on little things like, oh, that tickled his memory somehow, but he couldn't remember why. Oh, that reminded him of something.
Yeah.
Because Mike remembers everything. So there will never be a moment when he has that hang-up of something. And that definitely shaped how I had to tell the story. So.
I'm sorry, as to the audience, I should have reminded everyone, I posted about this several times today, but we're giving away 5 prizes today. There's a Cthulhu toy that I posted, and then 4 CDs of fungi from Yuggoth that Fedogan and Bremer donated, and Matt's facilitating that for me. So So keep watching. You'll win some stuff. A couple of the prizes I'm going to give away on Wednesday. So if you're not watching this live, if you're watching it later, you still have a chance to win cool stuff. So I'll tell you how to do that a little bit later. Yeah, I've already got the fold on Audible, and looking forward to listening to it. So, 14. What was the genesis of 14? How did that start?
Honestly, 14 really started because I couldn't write the book I wanted to. It was an idea, a couple ideas I'd had kicking around in my head for a while, and my publisher at the time was Fruited Press under Jacob Keir, who mostly did a lot of zombie stuff. And I had done my first 2X Heroes books with them, and a little Robinson Crusoe H.P. Lovecraft mashup novel that I did. And
I love that book.
Which one?
It's fun.
I think you're talking about Robinson Crusoe one, Peter.
Robinson Crusoe.
You read it? Oh my God! I've never met someone who actually read it before.
I've got it on the shelf someplace. You want
What's
me to
the title of that mashup novel?
What did you say, Rick?
What is the title of the Robinson Crusoe novel?
Yes.
It's the Eerie Adventures of the Lycanthrope Robinson Crusoe.
Well, every other book has that title these days.
It's a common one, I know, but it seemed to work for the book.
You know, I'm working on that Pinocchio Lovecraft mashup right now. So.
But yeah, anyway, 14. So I've been working on all this, and I'd actually had a Zombies on the Moon story that I've been playing with, which was a very sci-fi zombie story. And I was probably a third of the way into that, and the publisher got in touch with me and said, by the way, you know, I know we talked about this sci-fi zombie thing. I actually just bought a Zombies in Space book. He's like, so, you know, you should probably think about doing something else. And so I was like, oh, all right. And the only other thing I had in my mind was I'd had a couple ideas floating around for just a creepy apartment building story, which had sprung out of a bunch of different things. I lived in an old apartment building when I first moved to Los Angeles. Actually, just this big, weird brick building on a hill. And I don't know, there's just a bunch of odd things about it. Mostly what got me thinking about it was the fact that I lived there for almost 2 years. And it struck me that for the longest time I lived there, and I didn't know anybody in the building. And that struck me as very odd when you think of like living in a college dorm, which is basically the same setup as an apartment building. But you know everybody in your dorm. You know all your neighbors, and you talk and you hang out, and you know you're going to movies together, you're sleeping together, you're just doing everything. And I knew nobody in my building.
Right.
And then what happened was, I think it was in 2006, I think, there was a huge fire in Griffith Park that almost actually burned down the Griffith Park Observatory. And I went up on the roof of the building and found that 3 or 4 of my neighbors were already up there. And then like some more neighbors came up, and we basically just sat up there all night because up on a hill up on the roof, we had this great view of the city, and we could see the whole fire raging. And so we kind of sat there all night wondering if we were going to watch the Griffith Park Observatory burn down, and talking and drinking, got to know each other. And all of a sudden, just like that, we had this little community in the building, and people were talking and saying hi to each other and chatting and sharing movies, all that sort of stuff. And so that really stuck with me. The other thing that struck with me was then as I was moving out of the building, and it was at that point, you know, like when you move out of any apartment, any house, where you've taken over all the bulk stuff, and there's just like little things crammed in the corner somehow everywhere. You know, like you just need 4 boxes to just start scooping up all this weird random stuff that's left.
Exactly.
And my girlfriend and I were going through, and we started joking about the fact of, wouldn't it be funny to write like some weird note and like shove it in the back of one of the drawers or something for someone to find later on? Because we started thinking about the fact that you never know what happened in your apartment before you lived there. And the more I thought about this, the more I liked it. The idea that, you know, people could have died in your apartment. People, you know, could have been murdered in your apartment. People, you know, could have done drugs. They could have made drugs. There's all these things that could have been going on, and you just don't know because you don't have that continuity of ownership with an apartment. And so these two ideas, the idea of community, the idea of, you know, what could have happened in your building, in your apartment, or in your whole building before you lived there, just started going around in my head. And so when Jacob Keir said, yeah, you can't really do zombies in space, I said, oh, okay, well, I'll do this other thing I've been thinking of. And I actually wrote the entire first draft in 6 weeks. It's the fastest I've ever written anything, even to this day. So,
You know, that's in the book too. The neighbors meeting on the roof at different points in the book. I don't want to give out any details, but it was one of my favorite things about the book. One of many. It just all seems so real, you know, even though it's something that probably, or I hope, wouldn't happen in real life.
it happened to me.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad you were there to stop what happened that we won't mention. So I and the world thank you. But yeah, that was in the book, meeting up on the roof. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was just the book is not in any way autobiographical. It's not based on anything, but it was just, I don't know. It just sort of all just sort of poured out at once. Honestly, to this day, I was actually just telling somebody at San Diego Comic-Con, I am stunned that the book is as popular and well-liked as it is. Because I'd done Ex-Heroes, which did pretty well, the Crusoe Lovecraft book, which bombed horribly, and then I did Expatriates, the second Ex-Heroes book, and that did fairly well, and actually even lifted up Ex-Heroes a little bit too. And I was actually worrying at that point that, like, well, crap, what if I'm just going to be the guy who writes about superheroes fighting zombies? And that's going to be my whole writing career. And so I wrote 14, and I honestly didn't think anyone was going to like it, because it was so weird and quirky, and this slow burn to things going crazy book. And when the publisher looked at it, he actually read the whole thing in like 2 sittings and absolutely loved it. And it's just been amazing to me how much the response on it and how many people have liked it.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I read today that a couple of weeks ago, it was in the top 10 books on Audible. So.
Yeah, when a lot of people figured out that It and The Fold are loosely related, tied together.
Oh, let me put you on the screen, Rollick. Hang on a second. There you go. Oh!
Oh my God! Seriously, I think you're one of 9 people who might own a hard copy of that, and I'm the other 6, or at least 6 of the others.
But, you know, there's you know, a lot of writers watch the show too, and there's a lesson there in what you just said, Pete, which you can probably articulate far better than me, about writing 14 because you had the need to write it. You know, not for any other reason, I guess. So.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was just a story I wanted to tell. I think there is really something to. I know there's all the write what you know, write what you want, blah, and I do firmly believe. I mean, one of the things my current publisher at Crown really likes is I completely understand this is a business, and you know you need to have a financial thoughts when you're doing this. But yeah, I also firmly believe though that if you want to write something, it's the thing you've got to write. You know, so. Or not have to write, but I don't know. I don't think anyone should be, let's put it this way. I don't think anyone should be writing something they really don't want to write. If you have no interest in Chihuahua love stories, that is the last thing you should be focusing on.
Dinosaur porn.
Yeah, but that's just it. Dinosaur, you know, I mean, if you're into dinosaur porn, awesome. Go write your Webster's Dictionary size book of it, and it'll be awesome. You know, I mean, we've all seen it. You see those people who they're trying to follow a trend. They're trying to follow what's hot in the bubble right now.
Yeah.
It's obvious they have no real interest in this topic and this subject. I don't know. I feel like I'm babbling.
No, you're not. No, you're not at all. I have a question from the audience. Kevin Wilson says, ask Peter Clines about his interesting bio on Amazon.
It's 100% true, every bit of it.
Okay, I'm just going to read this. He made his first writing sale at age 17, so that everyone knows what Kevin Wilson's talking about. He made his first writing cell at age 17 to a local newspaper. At age 19, he completed his quadruple PhD studies in English literature, archaeology, quantum physics, and interpretive dance. In 2008, while surfing, I can't even get through this, surfing Hawaii's Koala Beach, he thought of a viable way to maintain cold fusion that would also solve world hunger, but forgot all about it when he ran into actress, I can't say this name, Yvonne somebody, back on the beach, and she offered to buy him a drink. He was the inspiration for both the epic poem Beowulf and the motion picture Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is great. I can't even go on. It's funny. So Evan wants to know why you about your bio.
Well, it's mostly true, except for a few small parts. I don't know. It was just at the time, when I was starting out, you need to do something to catch people's eyes, and I just decided to go goofy. That's all it is. I've seen so many people who do bios where they're trying to make themselves sound good and impressive. Like, yes, I won the Sheboygan Short Fiction Contest 2 years in a row with the same story. And I just figured, what the hell? And there's nothing against it if someone watching this happened to win the Sheboygan Short Fiction Contest, if it's a thing. But so I just decided, what the hell? If I got to make myself sound impressive, I'll just go all the way. So.
Well, I know that all that stuff is a lie because it's actually Pete Rawlik that did all that stuff. So.
Well, I'm just curious, since Mike couldn't pronounce it, what was the last name of the actress?
It's Yvonne Stravosky from, she was on Chuck and Dexter and, she's on something else right now. I just blanked on it. But at the time Chuck was on, I was a big Chuck fan, and she's, I don't know.
And the more popular you get, and the more popular you get, Pete, she's going to notice that someday and go, wait a minute, I don't remember that at all.
So someday you're going to let it run into Yvonne Stravosky.
I'm actually, in the X-Hero series, one of the things of it, the X-Hero series is a zombie series set in Los Angeles, and one of the ongoing things is that the survivors sort of have an unofficial game where you get points for killing celebrity zombies. And
that's great.
So I have actually mentioned tons of celebrities in the book who it turns out have become zombies and been killed by various people here, and I know someday I'm going to run into one of them. Actually, I have run into one. Nathan Fillion was actually thrilled that he was a zombie and was shot in the head. Yes, he loved that.
Had he read your book when you met him?
He actually had. The whole reason I met him was he'd read the first two at that point. Okay, a little bit of backstory. I actually used to work in the film industry for many years. I was a prop master. I tried screenwriting a bit and had a little bit of luck with that. I've actually had more luck with screenwriting since getting out of the film industry than I did while I was in it. But one of my old assistants actually ended up working on Castle. This is actually after I had been out, and one day he noticed that Nathan Fillion had his iPad out, and he was reading X-Heroes, which was my book. And my assistant Ilya, there's a character in the book named Ilya, just like a little side character, supporting character, and he is named after Ilya because Ilya helped me with a couple things while I was writing the book. And Nathan, he was like, "Oh my God, you're reading X-Heroes?" And Nathan was like, "Yeah, have you read it?" And he's like, "Yeah, I used to work for the guy." And so Nathan Fillion got very excited by that and started tweeting about it, which helped the book a lot. Obviously, have Nathan Fillion tweet about how much he loves your book.
Oh, yeah.
And the second book was pretty much almost done at that point. So when it came out, I basically got a note through Ilya to Nathan Fillion's assistant and said, "Hey, I would love to send him an autographed copy if there's like an address there at the studio or a mail drop, whatever it's got." And his assistant was like, just come on down to the set." And I'm like, "Well, no. I worked in the industry. I know it's always a pain when like guests show up and you got to sort of work around them. I'm fine." He's like, No, come on down. It's like season 3. We got this show nailed down. No problem." So I went down and hung out on the bullpen set with Nathan Fillion for like half an hour, and we talked about zombies and movies and big successes when you finally get to be where you want to be. So
That's a great story.
Yeah. It's fun. And he's huge. I've got a picture somewhere of the two of us together, and he's like a foot taller than me. So
Oh, really?
He looks tiny.
I think he's probably. I mean, I'm sure it's online somewhere, but I think he's like 6'3" or 6'4".
Wow.
Yeah.
So well, speaking of all that, the ex-zombies, or pardon me, ex-heroes. It's basically superheroes in a zombie post-apocalyptic world, right? That's
Yeah.
what
The basic setup for the series is that it's a world where there were superheroes. A zombie apocalypse happens. The heroes fail to save the day, and now it's the zombie post-apocalypse that we've seen a lot of times. Except there are superheroes who are doing their best to try and keep everything together. And it kind of came out of a couple of years back, a major comic publisher, who we won't call out by name, did a thing about zombie superheroes. And I'd gotten really excited when I heard about it, and then when it came out, it just felt like this huge missed opportunity to me. That there's so much this could have done, and it didn't do anything, and I scribbled all these notes to myself of, well, this is what I would have done with it. I would have done this and this, and explored this idea and that aspect. And then actually what happened was when my girlfriend and I, oddly enough, after moving out of that old apartment building I was talking about, we moved into a new apartment where I could finally have an office. And I was unpacking a bunch of the boxes that you carry around for years that you never sort of unpack. And one of them actually had a bunch of old sketchbooks from when I was like 10, 11, 12, and wanted to write comic books for a living. And so it was filled with tons of superheroes I had made up when I was 10, 11, 12. And I realized that a lot of these were very basic archetypes, that I could plug all these into the story I wanted to tell and get to explore, how do the survivors feel about it when you've got a guy whose zombies can't bite because their teeth break on his skin? The fact that these people are essentially safe, and also that you're now basically at their mercy. That if these people one day just decide, you know what, we're going to take off and go to Hawaii, good luck to all of you, then you're screwed. And that was something I wanted to see. I wanted to see how, I don't know, this sounds so uppity, and I don't mean it like this, but like the social dynamics would work, and just the fun ideas of what would it be like to be the hero who, you're the big Boy Scout hero, and now here comes the family where Dad's been bitten. So, well, sorry, Dad, you can't come in. Well,
yeah, and also, I mean, yeah, social dynamics, because I mean, I assume some people are a little upset that you've got these superheroes with these godlike powers and yet the zombie apocalypse still happened.
Yeah.
They didn't stop.
That's part of it. I also, you said godlike powers. It's funny because one of the big things for me was I didn't want like actual Superman. I didn't want somebody who could bench press the Himalayas or something, because it does start making you wonder, okay, why hasn't someone done something about it? Why didn't they stop it if they're that powerful? The most powerful hero is actually a guy called Zap, who is sort of like an energy version of the Human Torch, or if you're a really geek, if you remember X-Ray from the UFOs.
Rick probably does.
It's a novel. It's an enemy of the Hulk, if I remember correctly.
See?
Yes, it is. Points.
You win.
Give that man a Cthulhu statue. But yeah, Zap is pure energy, but one of the things I like about it is the whole idea that he's actually so powerful that he can't do a lot of things, because anything he touches gets vaporized, so he has to be careful about how he moves, about what he does. If he relaxes too much and just starts letting off extra energy, he'll cook everything around him, or incinerate everything around him. So yes, you have this insanely powerful guy who can't really do much. And the fact that when he does do things, everything he does is sort of on the cataclysmic level. That if he shoots an energy beam, yes, it will destroy that X, and the X behind it, and the building behind that, and then depending on the angle, we'll just start going down into the earth and digging a tunnel that goes like 6 miles before the energy gets spent out into that. So the most powerful guy on the team can't really do anything. And past that, everyone is much lower level superheroes. So it would make it more believable that A, they weren't able to stop it then, and B, yes, now living in Los Angeles with, 5-6 million zombies, they haven't just cleaned it out in like an hour,
Yeah. Guys, please feel free to jump in if you have questions. Rick, I don't know, you might have some questions.
I'm curious about one thing. You got a map behind your head. Is that the suffering map?
Actually, yes, it is. It's if you know the book, The Suffering Map was my first attempt at a novel, and I finished it, and it didn't really go anywhere, which is for the best, actually. I can totally admit, looking back at it, wow, I'm glad that did not sell. But one of the very last things I worked on in the film industry was the Hallmark Channel had a movie series called Mystery Woman, if any of you ever heard of those or saw those. And the very last one we did was actually set at a book fair. And
I love that. I love that series.
You actually saw those?
I've seen them all.
I worked on a ton of those.
Pete's been secretly following your career and didn't know it.
Seems it.
I call those stalkers today, but yeah.
Oh, this is awkward today.
But yeah, if you watch the last episode they did, they go to a book fair, and the whole idea is one of the guest stars is like a if I remember right, a former KGB spy who retires and writes like spy thrillers now. And we needed like extra stuff for the background, so I made a little like book banner for my own book, and actually made tons of like covers for it. So at various ports you can see my book stacked up in the background there. And then I left the film industry right after. That was actually my very last thing I worked on when I was working full time in the film industry, and I left and then started selling books for real. So
I will tell you, I'm working on an article because in Mystery Woman there's an episode in which the author is not actually the author and is murdered by the person who's actually writing the books.
I don't think I worked on that one. I think that was one of the earlier ones. So.
But I've traced that exact plot has appeared in Murder, She Wrote, Midsummer Murders, Columbo.
Yeah, I remember the Columbo one.
Yeah, it's been that exact plot's been used like 4 or 5 times, and that's just where I've been able to find it easily. So I'm sort of like collecting this list of events that use this exact same plot, and Mystery Woman was the one that inspired the whole listing. And because I just watched it like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I think the first one I worked on was the one where she finds out she's adopted. And then there was a whole, and that was just like a whole, like working on it was this whole nightmare because literally during production, pre-production, my car broke down. So for the first week, I was borrowing my girlfriend's car and kind of leaving her trapped at home, so I could get to set. So.
All right.
I know you just went to Comic-Con, so I want to get to that in a couple minutes. But before I do that, Matt Carpenter here, he's on vacation, so I think he's on a cell phone and he can't really chat. I want to ask a question for Matt because, or at least have you talk about it because, and you can't really talk it. I don't even know if there's an answer for this because you can't really talk about this story too much. But several times, Matt Carpenter here recommended to me The Long Deep Dream. And I read it a couple years ago and really loved it. So I don't even know if there's anything you can say about that story, but maybe just give a little synopsis on it. It's in Cthulhu Unbound 2, I think.
Yes. The Long Deep Dream is a noir Cthulhu story. It was actually my second actual fiction sale in my whole career.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the first one was a little thing that an online journal bought called The Hat Box. Funny story, which he and I have learned since then. Jonathan Mayberry and I essentially started our fiction careers at almost the exact same moment, submitting to the same anthology.
Really?
And he got in, and I did not make the final cut. And the next place I showed my story to, they bought it. So yeah, the Long Deep Dream is the whole point of Cthulhu Unbound was to do Lovecraft stories in different genres. So there's comedy ones, there's like fantasy ones. There's a fantastic uh, Captain Nemo Lovecraft story where Captain Nemo finds this island in the Pacific that's not on any maps. And I did this noir detective story that I think honestly because I just watched The Maltese Falcon like a week before, and so I just sat down and started scribbling, and the whole thing came out. The ugly truth, I've never confessed this before. John Sinceri, editor for Cthulhu, Tom Brandon, if you happen to be watching this, I'm so sorry. I was actually a first draft I submitted because I ran out of time. I'm not even sure I spell checked it. I just wrote the story and sent it, and they bought it, and I'm very ashamed of that now. So.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. You guys have read it, right, Pete?
Yeah.
I've read it.
Yeah.
So, Peter Clines,
Yes.
you worked on 4 episodes of Silk Stock. I just Googled you.
Oh no, actually, I worked on like 2.5 years of Silk Stockings.
Okay.
There's only
you
4
realize that
episodes.
in Florida, that series is laughed out of. It's a laughing stock, right?
You realize that on set, the series was a laughing stock.
Oh my God! When I was dating Danielle, this is over. It's been like 21 years. I remember dating Danielle. She was in college, my wife, and she was just enamored with that show, Silk Stockings. And then she's crying because I guess the main guy died or something. I'm going, are you kidding me?
I actually live in Palm Beach, and the whole opening scene is them standing on top of this mountain, looking down at the city.
Yeah, there's
no mountains.
There were so many things in that show. I love the show. I love working with the people because the people on the show were great. The cast was great. The the crew was fantastic to work with. The guy who played when I did the second half of the show with Janet Gunn and Chris Potter.
Okay.
And the guy who actually played the captain, I thought this was so awesome. Okay, I have to back up a little bit so this will make sense and why. Like I said, I was working in the film industry and also writing, or trying to write. I was writing. I wasn't getting anywhere with it. But I actually was going up to Paramount a lot of the times and pitching to Star Trek. The first script I ever wrote actually got me in a room with Ron Moore for half an hour for a Deep Space Nine script that I did, and I got to bounce a bunch of ideas off him. And it turns out he really liked me, and they put me on their list of hey, if this person wants to come in, let him come in. So I was going up there and pitching to Deep Space Nine and then to Voyager. But I was working on Silk Stockings at the time, so it was always sort of trying to find the right time to go up, all that sort of thing. And at one point, Charlie Brill was this actor, an actor-comedian actually, who played the police captain on Silk Stockings. And he mentioned to me that he was going to be off for the next week because he was going up to L.A. to do an episode of Deep Space Nine. And I was like, get out! You're going to be on Deep Space Nine? That's awesome. He's like, yeah, you're into that sort of stuff, right? I'm like, yeah. And I'd never realized this. It turned out Charlie had been in the original series.
Tribble.
Yes. Charlie was the Klingon disguised as a human in the original Tribble episode. And the whole reason, so he's talking about this, I'm like, holy crap, you're on Star Trek? Yeah, his wife, we were expecting the baby, and we're short on money, and I was a little worried because I wasn't getting any jobs. And then my friend Lenny said, oh, I can get you this thing. I'm like, Lenny? He's like, yeah, Lenny Nimoy. He's a great guy. He got me this job. He said, I'm on this sci-fi thing. Let me see if we can get you a job. And so that's how we ended up on Star Trek.
Yeah, it's too bad that show never went anywhere. Never really amounted to anything.
It didn't catch on.
Well, you got to explain why he was on Deep Space Nine.
Because then what happened was on Deep Space Nine, they did a whole time travel flashback episode where they inserted the entire Deep Space Nine cast and Charlie himself back into the original story. So they basically did a new version of Trouble with Tribbles where Charlie is there as his original character back in the 60s, and Charlie current age is there because he's become convinced if he can kill Kirk back then it will fix his status in the Klingon Empire. It was one of the things they did for the 25th anniversary of Star Trek, but So anyway, yeah, that is a fun silk stocking story. I mean, yes, it was a goofy show, but I got to work with a ton of great people. I got to meet a ton of great people. One of the best directors I've ever worked with was a guy named John Paragon, who I actually learned a lot about storytelling from him. Like as a director, just watching what he did. John is probably best known to most people watching this. John was Johnny the Genie on Pee-wee's Playhouse. He was the head in the box. And now he's a director. So he was great. I actually did a couple episodes that Carl Weathers directed. And Carl was just awesome and put up with me when I would constantly make fun of him about Rocky and Predator and stuff. So
Didn't John Paragon direct Elvira?
yeah, he actually wrote with her. They came out to LA together and did a bunch of stuff. He actually ghost wrote. Actually, I'm not even sure he ghost wrote. I think he might actually have his name on. Back in like the early mid '90s, there were a bunch of Elvira young adult novels, and he actually was the one who wrote all those.
Aren't we really here to
concept? But
what, Rick?
young adult Elvira novels.
Yeah. Yeah. Ow. Yeah. But no, I was going to say, aren't we really here to talk about Veronica Mars? Because I saw that on your IMDb.
No. Bring it on.
There's a lot of embarrassing stuff on there to talk about.
Did you work on Veronica Mars?
I worked a little bit on the first season. Yeah.
I don't see it as embarrassing. It's cool as hell.
That was a good series. Yeah, I mean, I watched a little of it.
I worked on it for about, I want to say like the first 7 or 8 episodes, and what happened was the prop master on it didn't have the budget for another person, and the guy, Greg, who was the assistant prop master on it, he and I had worked together a lot before. The prop master had not really done a show before, so the nature of television, work on television as opposed to movies, was catching her off guard. And Greg just kept telling me, look, just hire Peter. Hire Peter. Oh, well, they're not giving me the budget for it. And he's like, but just do it. Hire him, they'll complain, and they won't say anything in the end because he'll be working. And she didn't. And so finally, after like 7 episodes, I was like, look, I got to go do something else because I need steady work. Because I was just working like a day here, a day there. And I think a week after I said that and left, they hired somebody else full time.
Yeah, sounds like obviously.
Yeah. If you ever, here's my big easy spot claim to fame. If you remember one of the early Veronica Mars episodes, just tracing water flow by dropping rubber ducks down a sewer, I'm the guy who went out and bought all those rubber ducks. So I did a lot more for the show for that, but that's like a nice big easy thing you can point to.
That's awesome. Hey, what you've written several Lovecraftian stories. You've written 14. When did you get into Lovecraft, and what fascinates you about Lovecraftian themes?
I was pretty young. I remember there were the old, crap, I can't remember. I think there were Del Rey paperbacks that had like the great black and white covers. And I found a couple of those when I was probably 12 or 13, and bought a couple. And very honestly, at 12 or 13, like some of the stories I just didn't quite get. Why is this scary? I don't understand. So there's a monster in space. Okay. And then other ones really stuck with me. And then as I kept revisiting them again and again and realizing, ooh, this is neat, this is neat. And then realizing at some point how many stories that I did like. That, you know, there are Doctor Who episodes that are Lovecraftian. There are, you know, Conan, fantasy, all these different things that have very Lovecraftian influences. I don't know. I really like the idea of there being. I'm a big believer in science, in things, but I also believe that there's a lot of stuff that we just haven't discovered yet. Mm-hmm. That, you know, yes, science can explain everything, but it can't explain something if we don't know about it. And a lot of Lovecraftian ideas that I like go off the idea that there's just a lot of stuff we don't know. And so when some poor sap stumbles across this, you know, big thing, I mean, yeah, we go up to Antarctica, and what the hell, there's a whole city up here in the mountains. That's madness. What the hell? You know, that kind of stuff. I just really like that whole idea. So,
Do you have a
That's about
favorite
it.
story by Lovecraft himself?
Mountains of Madness is one of my favorites because it's a larger work. I'm going to say something that's probably going to be heresy here, and I'll understand if I accidentally, my connection fails after this. Okay, I have to shamelessly name drop. I got to interview Shane Black once. Between leaving the film industry and writing full time, I wrote for a screenwriting magazine, and just got to interview a ton of big names. And I got to interview Shane Black once, and he made a great observation that I always loved, and I've repeated many times since then, is that story is what happens outside your, or sorry, plot is what happens outside your characters. Story is what happens inside your characters. Plot is on the back of the book. Story is what you tell your friends about. I think Lovecraft wrote amazing plots. His plots are fantastic. I think he's a little weak on the story side. That a lot of his characters are interchangeable.
Yeah, very true. Yeah.
So, that being said, yeah, I think Mountains of Madness is probably one of my favorites just because it has the room to do a little more with the characters. Also, Shadow over Innsmouth, because we actually get to see this character develop, change as he learns things, discovers things, and then discovers things about himself as the story goes on. They're probably my top two, and I know that's sad because they're probably the two best-known Lovecraft stories. But there you
I
go.
would say that Call of Cthulhu is probably the one that comes to everyone's minds first. I would say that Mountains of Madness, but yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, you were just at Comic. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please.
You were just at Comic-Con. What'd you do at Comic-Con? How was it?
I did a ton of stuff. I was there actually as one of my publisher's guests, so I did a bunch of panels. I did a bunch of signings. Which were good. I got to see a bunch of people, a bunch of other authors that I know. Scott Sigler, who I've met a couple times. Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian. He and I have met a couple times, and we get along great. He's a great guy. And then I also got to meet Ernie Klein, who we are constantly mistaken for one another, or at least our books are mistaken for one another's material. He actually told me he's had a ton of people tell him how much they love X-Heroes. And I told him, well, that's all right, because I've had a ton of people congratulate me on Ready Player One. I got to see Sean McGuire again, who's an old friend. Just, I don't know, it was great seeing a lot of people there, doing the panels, having a really stupid moment on the world-building panel where I was sitting next to Richard Kadri, and it wasn't until he introduced himself that I'm on a sci-fi panel with Richard Kadri, and it doesn't actually click in my mind until he introduces himself. Like, oh wait, you're Sandman Slim Richard Kadri. Holy crap! Not just some other random author with that name. Yeah, there was that. Saw a ton of awesome costumes. What else did I see? I saw Ailey Martinez again. I don't know. That's just it. Comic-Con is just so overwhelming. I think probably... Yeah, it's kind of like if you went on some gigantic mescaline trip in the desert, that you can sort of remember going into it on one end and coming out the far end, and wow, you remember some colors and bright things that happened and stuff like that, but past that? I remember one point...
Come back.
Yeah, exactly. I remember one point I passed Doug Jones just walking on the street, and I saw him like on the other side of this thing, and we like crossed the crosswalk, and I have no idea what compelled me to say this, but I just looked up and said, you could be a photo double for Doug Jones. You're a dead ringer. And he left. So
yeah, he's a really nice guy. He said he was wanted to be on the show sometime. We keep getting our wires crossed, but hopefully that happens. So, speaking of Doug Jones, he was just on The Flash.
yeah, he was. That was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, too bad they had him. Well, I guess spoilers, but he died. But that's a minor spoiler.
Kind of horribly too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, did you see the Batman vs Superman trailer at Comic-Con, or did you see it later?
You know what? I actually still haven't seen it. I've seen a couple like And we're done. I got to admit, and again, I know some people are going to growl at me about this. I am not super excited for it. I'm not against it. I'm not angry about it or anything, but Man of Steel just left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, and so I'm still going to go see it. I'm going to be there with everyone, but I'm just not like racing to, oh my god, new footage, oh my god, new analysis, oh, new press announcement. I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, that movie's coming out. So.
Honestly, Pete, you should check out the Comic-Con trailer. There's an abbreviated version, but just Google the Comic-Con trailer, because I know a lot of people who felt that exact same way, and then they saw this trailer this past week and were immediately excited. I think that thing is going to be great. So you'll have to send me a note after you see the trailer and tell me if that actually happened to you. So.
Okay, I will.
Since we're on comic books, is it supposed to be Captain America's original shield behind you?
Yes, it is, actually. I made that for Halloween last year. So.
Oh, wow.
Again, the fun prop background. You know, who to talk to get certain things and how to make them look pretty. A friend of mine who actually works down for the opera in San Diego cut a metal blank for me, a shield blank, and then I spent the better part of an afternoon masking it, painting it. On my Facebook page, actually, while I was doing it, I put up this whole little tutorial of all the steps of it, like, and now here's the blank shield, and now here it is primed, and now here it is with the first color down.
How to?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Rick, were you going to say something?
No, that's fine.
Yeah, so how are you liking Flash versus Arrow? We talked a little bit about this yesterday on our video test, but it sounded like you were like me. Arrow is okay, and Flash is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I've heard Arrow got better. I watched, when it came out, I was kind of excited for it, and I watched the first 4 or 5 episodes, and they just rubbed me the wrong way for a couple different reasons. And so I was actually kind of leery about The Flash when I heard they were going to make a Flash TV show, because I was just really worried we were going to end up with a really dark, gritty Flash who'd be talking with Batman voice.
Yeah.
Or something like this. I'm the Flash. But one of the things that actually made me feel a lot better was I saw an interview with a couple of the producers, and they openly admitted, like, yeah, we made some mistakes with the first season of Arrow. There were some things we should have done differently, and they talked about that. And I was like, all right, well, I'll give The Flash a chance, and I love it. I think it's amazing. The sheer fact of the number of things they have done on that show that, 10, 15 years ago would, aside from technically impossible to do, or at least do believably, the level, I guess the level of acceptance for it, that they're willing to put stories like this on TV and completely believe there's going to be an audience for this.
Like Grodd.
Like Gorilla Grodd. I mean, right there. That we actually have a telepathic, super intelligent gorilla as a villain. And not only can we say that with a straight face, we can do it beautifully. It's not a guy in an old Party City moth-eaten costume or something. It just looked amazing, and we made it scary and ominous and just everything it's supposed to be, and did it well enough, or done enough stuff well enough that people were excited for it. People weren't sort of shaking their heads like, oh my god, they're going to do Grodd? People were like, oh my god.
Yeah.
So
I felt the same as you when I saw that they were doing The Flash. I was a bit leery, and then I watched the first episode and I thought, this is pretty good. But when they really sold me was at the very end of the first episode, when sorry, I just blanked on the doctor's name, on the scientist guy's name. Wells.
Harrison
yeah.
Wells.
Harrison Wells, thank you.
Yes.
When he, when they show what he's doing at the end of the episode there, I'm trying to be vague for anyone that hasn't seen The Flash. I think most people have seen it that watch this show probably, but that's when they really sold me. I thought, wow, what are they going to do here?
Yeah. I thought, I was actually, all right, I'm gonna give away one more tiny spoiler, but I think they kind of give it away at the same point. That I think we're halfway through the season and I was kicking myself that, oh my god, so the time-traveling scientist from the future is H. Wells
yes.
on this
Yeah, it reminded me of the. Go ahead.
I
Rick.
didn't
Go ahead.
catch it until Mike pointed it out to me, so you were on that.
Yeah, I'm a geek. No, it reminded me of. I think it's the 19. I think it was 1979. The movie Time After Time, where H.G. Wells he actually did.
Oh no, that with
Yeah,
David Warner.
Yeah, you guys remember that movie?
H.G. Wells chases Jack the Ripper.
Yep.
Yes, he chases Jack the Ripper into the 70s because H.G. Wells actually invented a time machine, and Jack the Ripper uses it. And
The only time Malcolm McDowell's ever been a good guy.
That's right. That's right. Well, except for Phineas and Ferb. So, but that doesn't count. But he's talking
H.G.
to.
Wells also appeared in maybe Warehouse 13.
Oh, did he?
Except it
And
was
Lois.
a woman. They made her a woman.
With the idea that
H.G. Wells.
she was the real H.G. Wells, or
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, in Time After Time, it made me remember the scene in Time After Time. The Flash did the Wells character when he's talking to his girlfriend. He says, "My name's Herbert Wells," and she's like, "Yeah, whatever." And she doesn't get it. And he goes, "H.G. Wells," So.
I'm going to shamelessly name drop one more time. I worked on one of the Beastmaster movies, and David Warner was the villain in it. And so I actually get to talk to David Warner about Time After Time, which was really cool. And he was up.
How was that?
He was very pleased. It was probably one of the only times, and it's bizarre with some of the people I've worked with and met. I think David Warner, as silly as it sounds, is one of the only times I've been starstruck with someone that I was working with.
I've read that he's a huge Lovecraft fan. Is that true?
I don't know. We didn't get to talk that much. He was only the way they'd scheduled it. He was only on set for like a week. But he kind of like quiet time to himself to be. And at one point, I couldn't help it because one of the jobs I was like just one of the assistants on the show. It was one of my first movies, and I went up to him and was asking like, the basic thing. One of the things you do is like when your actor walks off set, you walk up and you take everything they're holding from them, so that they don't have to like walk around holding their magic artifacts or whatever. And so I walk up, "Mr. Warner, can I take that for you?" And he was actually, no, Peter, I prefer to hang on to things. I like to, just keep it in my mind. I was like, all right, sure, So I kind of backed off, and then just out of force of habit, I did it again the next time they called cut, or the next time we finished the shot, and he just couldn't shoot. No, I'm like, right, sorry. And then I said, just out of curiosity, did you like hang on to all the scalpels while you were doing Time After Time? And his face just lit up. And he's like, "Oh, you saw that?" And I was like, "I love that movie." It's like, and I started rattling off bits with him. And if you remember that, he has that whole wonderful scene in the hotel room with H.G. Wells, where they're watching television together. And
where
I was
he
like,
tells
honestly,
H.G. Wells that he was wrong about the future and so forth.
yeah. And the whole great thing about was it where we come from, I was a freak, a monster, but here, Herbert, I'm an amateur.
Right.
And he was just pleased when we started talking about it, and he talked about how great it was, working with Nicholas Alexander, just the whole thing. He apparently loved working on the movie, and he was thrilled that like someone working on this movie actually knew it, and so.
Man, but yeah, it is a very good movie, And
It holds up well. I just saw it again recently. I mean, aside from the obvious, it's set in like 79 or 80, whatever it's set in. But yeah, other than that, it actually holds up very well. So.
Yeah, I mean, when you're watching it, when I watched it back then, they were traveling to the present day. The future was the present day. But watching it now, you can just accept, okay, they traveled to the 70s. So.
It's true. I never really thought of it that way.
Well, same thing with Superman the movie. What if Superman showed up in the 70s? This is what would have happened. So, okay, so you're gonna go see Ant-Man tonight, aren't you?
I am. I'm wearing my Ant-Man shirt. I don't know if you can.
No, hang on, let me put. Oh, wow. That's great.
Not that I'm a geek or anything.
Did you read Ant-Man in the comics?
I read a couple of them. I haven't read. I know there's I think they're on their third Ant-Man now in the comics, and I have not read any of that newer stuff. I really admit I got a little disillusioned with Marvel after the whole Spider-Man sells his soul to the devil to bring Aunt May thing back. So I haven't read a lot of stuff over the past, like, what's it been, about 10 years, 9 years since that happened. But yeah, back in the day, I actually, dating myself, I remember a store I used to go to had the wire comics rack that, you know, you'd pull everything off, and finding this old issue of Avengers on it, which I later found out was like 2 years old, and just somehow it just stayed on the back of the rack all this time. And it was the one where Ant-Man takes out the entire Avengers all on his own. And there's like him on the cover, like knocking out, I think, Wonder Man and the Vision or something. Or no, it's Wonder Man and somebody else, because the Vision's in the foreground covered with ants, and Scarlet Witch is covered with ants and screaming. So.
Well, he was the first Marvel superhero I read, but that was around 1963, I think.
Because he was in the original Avengers, like issue 1.
I read the Hank Pym version in Tales to Astonish.
Yeah, I think I pretty much got in just as Scott Lang, like, stole the suit, and he seemed to be like a regular. He shows up in other comics guys. Like, I remember him showing up in the Micronauts, actually, which was kind of cool.
What are your thoughts on Marvel and DC these days? Not the movies, the comics right now. What are your thoughts on what they've been doing?
I don't know. It's a huge, broad question.
I'm a little disillusioned. That's why I asked that question. I'm more of a DC than Marvel. I love both, but yeah, I don't know.
I've always been more Marvel than DC. I think one of the things that has sort of rubbed me the wrong way, and this is going to be one of those tricky things where a bunch of stuff I'm about to say will probably get taken out of context somewhere.
That's great, because that builds ratings when that happens.
Oh, cool. Then here we go. I think it's pretty hard to argue. I know a lot of people will, that the Marvel and DC universes were not created for kids. It's a kid-centric universe. I mean, really, the whole idea that you get superpowers because you were standing next to an atomic bomb when it went off is just goofy. The origins of all these heroes are pretty goofy. And I think there's a... Alright. I'm going to try and organize my thoughts here a little bit.
Sure.
I think Marvel Marvel kind of started it, in my mind. And I think they came down with what I've jokingly referred to on my writing website as very special episode syndrome. And this is when you have that episode of Family Ties or Different Strokes that deals with child abuse or child molestation or drugs or whatever, and this rating shoots up. You know, this episode shoots up in the ratings, and it gets all this critical acclaim. And you can almost always tell on shows when they sort of start falling into the very special episode loop. I mean, a great modern example is Grey's Anatomy. When Grey's Anatomy began, it was pretty much a comedy show. It had some serious stuff, but it was an hour of the goofy, silly stuff that doctors experience and go through with the day-to-day. And if you watch it now, it is just... I don't watch it, but even just watching the commercials, it's, 42 minutes of the most extreme melodrama you could ever have. Because they realize these are the episodes people talk about, and so they just stopped doing everything else. And I think Marvel and DC did the same thing. I think what happened was, at some point, if I had to pinpoint it from Marvel, I would probably say Kraven's Last Hunt. They did a much darker, much more mature, aimed story, and then this became like their go-to. Holy crap, look at all the ratings this got, look how popular this was. Let's start making everything dark and everything gritty. And by doing this, they stopped aiming at a demographic, which is normally... My argument would be comics are pretty solidly aimed at like sort of the 12 to 18-year-old demographic in there. They stopped aiming at the demographic and they started aiming at a generation. And so really right now, pretty much any Marvel or DC comic book you aimed up is aimed at people who were 12 to 18 in probably the early 80s, late 70s, in that general range. Like Generation Xers, more or less.
Yeah.
And less aimed at kids. And I've heard a lot of arguments against this, saying how, oh, but you know, kids these days, they've got video games, they've got this, you know, all this stuff distracting them. I had video games. I had a crap Radio Shack computer when I was a kid, but it had games on it that I thought were awesome. I had an Atari 2600. I grew up in a little resort town where we had an arcade. I literally had an arcade less than a mile from my house. And I read comic books. And I don't think it's a coincidence that as Marvel and DC have moved away from that demographic following a generation, that suddenly we have this huge boom in young adult books. Basically young adults are still looking for reading material somewhere, and they're just finding it in actual books now. And suddenly you have, I mean, the young adult market is gigantic now. And I think that's what happened is you know, they used to have this huge following when they aimed at that demographic, followed it up to follow the generation, and now they've got young adult books are filling in and taking all that money, to be honest. And I mean, you look at comic sales these days between the big two, and it's amazing if a comic book breaks 100,000 copies.
Mm-hmm.
When during the Depression, comic books were selling 2 or 3 million copies an issue.
And yet they're not really asking themselves why and what are we doing wrong. It doesn't seem...
Well, it's probably tough because they've moved everything to go that way. When you've basically moved your whole business to something else, you know, I mean, because once you're aiming at that higher demographic, well, you have to hire bigger, better artists who now need bigger, better supplies, bigger, better materials to work with. You
and
know,
they pass that cost on to us, which I can't afford comic books anymore because they're $4 a piece.
Exactly.
I mean, I can buy a comic book. I mean, most of us can, but I can't keep up with the series or anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny because I stopped in at my comic shop today to pick up one book, and they didn't have it, and they said they would get it for me. And they looked at me and says, like, you've been a customer here for 25 years. Why aren't you on our subscription service? And it's like, because, one, I used to buy 20 comics a week when they were $1. Now, that's $100.
Yeah.
Right.
And frankly, the writing's not that good, the storyline's not that good, and every 18 months I have a reboot. So why would I bother investing any time in a character which you're going to destroy? It doesn't make any sense. And I think Peter Clines is right when he talks about the shift because he brought up Micronauts earlier. Micronauts was a great comic book that tied into toys that came out for 8 to 14 years old. You had you hit the market twice. You had toys, you had a comic book that came out every month. It was guaranteed you were going to buy it, and it was funny as all hell. It dealt with some serious issues. But it was fun. It was fun to read. You had Power Pack and Rom the Space Knight.
Shogun Warriors.
Shogun Warriors, yeah. Marvel had all that wrapped up. And, you know, the Star Wars Marvel comics were fabulous. But, you know, they're all gone now. It's all very serious stuff, and I'm not sure I like it. You know?
I think Peter Clines, you may have answered a question for me too, because my son, like me, is hugely into Batman, and I loved comics growing up. I still love comics. If I was rich, I'd be buying a ton of them. But I can't get him into comics. I've got a bunch of comics on the shelf back here, and I can't get him to read even Batman comics. They don't interest him, and I think you may have hit on a major reason why. They're aimed at me, not him.
Yeah.
He's
I mean,
13, you know?
I think of the fact there was a little bookstore in my hometown, like a little bookstore newsstand called Garfield's, that I could walk down to, and they had count them, 3 wire racks of comics, and I would go down there all the time and search through everything. And I think I started, again, different time, I would make that walk, I think I started when I was like 8 or 9, that I would just get home from school and then walk a mile and a half down to Garfield's and, you know, buy comics. But then just thinking recently, my niece is, God, she's going into junior high, I think now. And I'm thinking like now, wow. Or actually, I just remember when she was like turning 10. And I think I would never give her a Marvel comic today. I dread to think some of the stuff that goes on that's discussed, even in the ones that, yeah, there's a lot of them that are labeled like only for adult readers and stuff. But even in the regular ones, I was like, I don't want a 10-year-old reading this. And she's not even my 10-year-old. She's like my loose, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
Like
let's. What was it last year? Archie meets Cthulhu, right? This was and this year it's going to be Archie versus Predator. Really?
Yep.
We needed to do this. This is a good idea.
Well, speaking of really, did we really need to do this? Commissioner Gordon is now Batman. You know, I'm done. That's it.
What? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Seriously?
It's freaking ridiculous.
Well, you want to know the strange logic behind that?
Is there?
Well, the name
James
James
Gordon.
Gordon comes from pulp magazines. And there was a character who was a more adult version of the Shadow in the late 30s, early 40s called the Whisperer, who was police commissioner James Gordon by day and this weird guy who dressed in gray and gunned down criminals at night. So James Gordon has his origins in the vigilante pulp hero.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, Will Murray can tell you all about this. I know it from Will.
Wow. So yeah. All right. So I got a last question for you.
Shoot.
And I think I know how you're going to answer this. But
7.
42. What is the meaning of life? 42.
The large.
4, 8, 15, 16, 23.
I quoted an interview a little bit ago where you said you were interested in super intelligent characters and solving, beating the other guy, outsmarting them, essentially. So the question is, Batman versus Superman, who would win? I mean, we're gonna find out, but
I don't know. I think it's probably in the long run you'd have to say Batman wins, because although it becomes a 50-50, Batman is basically willing to do anything to win. And recent movies notwithstanding, Superman isn't. That Superman has lines he won't cross. So, yeah, I think really as kids, we all say Superman because it just seems natural. But as adults, it becomes clear that Batman is the guy who's going to win. Especially modern-day interpretation of Batman. That Batman is the ruthless, grim, dark, merciless hero. So, yeah, it's probably going to be Batman.
yeah, I noticed when I think someone asked. I'm sorry, what's the guy that plays Ash? Pete.
Bruce Campbell.
Bruce Campbell, yeah, I like him. But somebody asked him about the upcoming movie, and he's like, "What, are you kidding me? Of course, Superman won." It seems like if you don't really know the characters, don't really put any thought into it, your automatic answer is Superman. But once you do and you think about it, then you realize that, well, no, yeah, he may have some godlike powers, but he's not a god. I mean, you have a green rock and you incapacitate him pretty easily, as a matter of fact.
Well, the funny thing is, I think that at some point, if Superman goes up against Batman and Superman gets the upper hand and he puts down Batman, he's going to say, "That's enough, I'm done." Where Batman will then say, "Okay, give me 6 months and I'm going to come back." And Batman will keep coming back until it ends in his favor, and then it will be done. It'll never happen again. And that, I think, is the difference, is that Superman will say enough, Batman will say, "No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's got to be finished my way."
There was a great...
Go ahead, Pete, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. There was a great article recently, and I can't remember where I saw it. I know I copied it on my Twitter feed, but someone was actually commenting on a thing that Grant Morrison had done in his Sun Gods book that he recently put out, which is about writing Superman and all. And it was about the interpretation of Superman as an angry, ruthless sort of guy like they did in the movie. And that the whole point of Superman is that he's this all-American Kansas farm boy who was raised by really good, great moral parents, and then discovers he completely has the power to live by this code. That it's easy enough for all of us to say, well, I don't want to ever have to kill anyone. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And Superman is the unique person who can, because he doesn't, he doesn't have to resort to anything else. He has the abilities that he can just choose, this is how I'm going to live. And, his first choice doesn't have to be, I will kill the monster. His first choice can be, wow, what is the monster doing here? What does it want? Maybe we can befriend it somehow. Maybe we don't have to kill it.
Right.
Whereas, yeah, Batman, on the other end, the hero who's completely mortal, takes the ruthless approach that we have to put things down. We have to stop them. Which, in a way, it's funny because we all sort of accept that, and yet at the same time, we accept the fact that, Batman hasn't brutally murdered every single person in his rogues gallery. That really, the second time the Joker escapes, the Riddler escapes, the Penguin escapes, Killer Croc escapes, on and on and on and on, and they kill one more person, that's on Batman. So you'd think, really, if they were being honest about this current gritty incarnation, that Batman should just have a string of bodies behind him.
Yeah, there's a Batman and Philosophy book. I think that's actually the exact title that discusses that and a million other things. Yeah. That, why hasn't he made that choice? And if he does, is that the right thing to do?
Well, we know the real reason is they just want to have recurring villains.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's... I think that's the catch what we're talking... Sorry, I cut you off.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say...
It's just a slight delay sometimes. Yeah, go ahead, Peter Clines.
Okay, I think what it ties back to, like you're saying, recurring villains, is what I was saying about how really the whole idea of superheroes is inherently silly. So, of course we're going to have recurring villains, of course we have, but the minute we start applying real-world logic to this, then it becomes, why hasn't Batman just killed all these people? With his philosophy and everything, that's what he would do, but he doesn't. And, as you sort of... That's why I think, really, these comics don't work when you try and aim them at adults. They can still do some really great stories, I think there have been some fantastic Spider-Man stories, Batman stories, Hulk stories, Superman stories. But I also think that the more they do these, the more the big holes in this become apparent. I think a great example is Brian Michael Bendis when he did Alias, a.k.a. Jessica Jones, and there's her whole backstory now with the Purple Man. And I remember when I was a kid thinking the Purple Man had a really stupid power, that basically people just have to do what he says. I'm like, well, that's kind of dumb. That's not much of a power. And then as I got older, I realized how, wow, how creepy this can be. And then Brian Michael Bendis pointed out just how creepy and powerful this would make someone. And yeah, especially creepy. If anyone had to do anything you said, there are no repercussions for you, no matter what. What does that do to you mentally? What does it do to everyone around you? But again, by doing this, we have just shown how inconsistent and coherent the Marvel Universe is, because really the Purple Man just should have taken over, a couple of years ago. Why aren't
Superman, if he's really that moral, why hasn't he flown to, countries with ruthless dictators where people are suffering and putting an end to that kind of thing?
Yeah. Why hasn't he done that? Why didn't he during, as obviously not applying as much more, during the Cold War, why didn't Superman just disarm every nuclear missile? Why... You could just sit here and list off things. Years back, John Byrne, when he, I know it's kind of a bad name to bring up these days, but when he originally did the Man of Steel series,
right,
he wrote a little introduction for it. And he brought up the fact that, no one ever questions the fact that, okay, so Superman can hear everything going on Earth at any point. So why do planes crash ever in the DC universe? The sheer fact if Clark Kent sleeps in for an extra half hour at work, how many people die somewhere on Earth because he just wanted to stay in bed? But again, we can't think about these things in a true comic book superhero universe. It's actually a little point I've made again on the writing blog. I think there's a big difference between a superhero story and a superpower story. Firestarter by Stephen King is a superpowered story, but the Human Torch is a superhero. Jumper is, a superpower story. Nightcrawler is a superhero. And I think a lot of Marvel and DC stuff, they've been trying to push into a more superpowered genre. The whole problem being every time they do this, it sort of crumbles their whole, universe that they're in.
They had to do a reboot.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel was doing their big, it's the world outside your window thing for a while. And I remember the first time I saw that, I thought, what complete nonsense this is. Because in the Marvel Universe, I mean, there's hundreds of superheroes. Mutation is a normal thing. Aliens are a known thing. Artificial intelligence is a normal thing. In the world of the Marvel Universe, if I jump off the Empire State Building, there's a decent chance someone will catch me. And that is not the world outside your window. Living in California, I am used to tremors. And in the real world, I know it's an earthquake, but in the Marvel Universe, I would not be out of my mind to think, oh, maybe there's a giant robot attacking. Maybe there's a monster coming up by the Santa Monica Pier. So
That is a giant robot. You just think it's an earthquake.
Yeah.
I'm wasting my time here. There's a giant robot.
I've kind of wondered how insurance works in the Marvel Universe. Because,
Well, Marvel did have. I mean, I never read them, but they had a storyline where there was actually a company.
Yes, that was cleaned up after
Dark and the Kingpin, which fixed
Damage
up
control.
all the messes in New York City.
damage control. Yes,
Yeah.
damage control. But how does any building in New York City get insurance in the Marvel Universe?
Or in the DC movies at this
Or
point.
Metropolis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the problem in the old comics was you would have all this destruction and nobody would die when these buildings collapsed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Zack Snyder handles that in Man of Steel, and not everyone agreed with his take on it, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
That people will die.
The other night I came home from watching Ant-Man, and my wife was telling me that there was a forest fire, a brush fire in California, and it had jumped the highway and set cars on fire. And I brought it up on CNN, and they got live pictures of this guy's boat on I-15 burning to the ground. How the hell do you explain that to your insurance company without CNN footage? I was driving down the highway, and my boat burned to the ground.
It
I
happens.
was walking down the street, and the scorpion attacked my car, and threw it at Spider-Man. Right. Do you have any proof of that?
Yeah, you know what? Your building insurance does not cover Zod's speed ray vision, so
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. When the rhino runs down a street, there's about 1,000 claims that all have to be dealt with.
There would be a special anti-Hulk insurance policy.
Yeah. Somehow I think Hulk is covered under Act of God.
yeah. Pete Clines, what are you working on next, or working on now?
I'm actually just finishing up edits on the next X Heroes book, which is book 5, Exile. And then I'm about to dive into a standalone book, which is kind of a road trip horror time travel story.
Oh, time travel.
Yeah. Which is kind of tough to explain. It basically begins, I read an excerpt from it at a couple signings earlier this summer. It basically begins with a little boy coming home from school, and on the side of the road near his house is a teenage boy in colonial clothes sitting next to a Model T Ford with a hydrogen engine. And that's how our story begins.
Well, I love time travel, so I look forward to reading it when it eventually comes out. Well, I know you have to get ready to go to Ant-Man.
Yes.
really appreciate you being on the show.
I was great. Thank you all very much for having me.
Thank you for being here.
For everybody watching, The Fold was published recently by Peter Clines. If you're watching this, you're probably into Lovecraft and horror, so do pick up 14. And if you're into superheroes and zombies, the X-Heroes series. So anyway, thanks a lot, Peter. Thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it. All you got to do to exit is just close your browser, and it'll kick you out.
Okay.
So.
All right. Thank you all very much. Bye.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. So Ant-Man was worth seeing, huh?
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I liked it. I actually liked it a lot.
Yeah, it will probably grow on me. Like I said, there's a couple of contrived scenes that just don't make any sense to me, but I'll learn to live with it.
You also have some reworked ideas from earlier Marvel movies.
Yes.
Which I won't spoil anything, but you'll be reminded of a very early Marvel movie.
No, Pete Clines had some great points in what he was saying about where the comics are aimed, and I don't disagree with him. At the same time, I like the concept of what if this particular superhero landed in the real world somehow, which is kind of what they were aiming for in Man of Steel, I think. You know, what if this happened? What would happen? You know, how would his parents react to it? How would he react to it? You know, Clark screws up big in Man of Steel, and I'm not even talking about the not taking the fight out of the city, not having that thought, but because if he'd have flown out of the city, Zod would have probably chased him out of the city. You know, but his first mistake was, and it wasn't intentional, but Zod says to him, "You brought us here when you activated the distress beacon on that vessel that you discovered in the ice." You know, so what if this guy really landed in the real world? That's kind of fascinating too, I think. So interesting to see how it meshes in the next movie. I told you guys this before the show started. I think I did, but 2 days ago was the original Batman vs. Superman release date, so we got to wait 8 more months.
You know,
yeah.
I was going to say, when you were talking before about, you know, comic books, you know, being aimed at a different group, I mean, I think a lot of that had to do with price. Because, you know, I used to get $1 maybe once a week from my parents when I was growing up in the 60s. I could go to the store and buy 8 comics so I could read a shared universe. Now, that doesn't even cover 1 comic.
Yeah.
So if you got some, you know, and storylines are linked much more tighter than they even were back when Marvel first started to really link them. So I mean, you know, if you want to collect something like, I don't know, Age of Apocalypse or whatever Marvel's doing, that's a hefty commitment.
Yeah, it is. Any event is. You've got the main miniseries or whatever they do in many cases, and then you've got all these other outlying sub-stories, I guess you'd call them.
Yeah. Well, you know, I guess like I said, I was in the comic book store today, and some guy said he really hated what Marvel was doing with this big crossover they're finishing up. And the guy said, "Well, okay, so you don't want the books?" And he says, "Oh no, I'll get them all." I don't know why you support something that you don't like.
Collectors.
Well, you make it in the habit of just reading it. Like the reason I went out of comics was around 1970. What happened was Marvel got bought by there was a change in ownership in Marvel, and they were told to stop writing long continued stories. They were allowed a few 2-parters, and the writing just went in the toilet. You were getting, especially with what Stan Lee was doing, you were getting very cliche plots in the Fantastic Four.
Okay.
So it was, like one shot, a villain doing the classic cause World War III plot, which I, had seen on television and movies and everywhere. For just like one issue, I mean, everything just went. So that's why I stopped reading them at the time, because I did like all the continuity, but now the continuity's gone really crazy.
Yeah. Well, I kind of quit in '85 after they started recycling X-Men stories from the '70s. Just it wasn't good anymore.
Well, one of the problems is, even though we get reboots, you get into a long string of storylines that, from an artistic point of view, should have ended.
Yeah.
Villains should die.
Yeah.
Characters should age.
Characters should age, and villains, and if you go back to the original escapist fiction, like we were mentioning Sherlock Holmes before, Professor Moriarty, usually a recurring villain lasts for 2 appearances, and if he's pretty good, it'll be 4, and occasionally get the exception, the guy who had his own series like Fu Manchu, which was like about 14 or 15, but he aged during that period.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. Daily comic strips in the papers sometimes do a better job of this. I'm thinking specifically of Doonesbury, where characters aged and died of Alzheimer's, etc., and children grew up, and also for a while, For Better or Worse, did this too.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike Nancy and Sluggo, who are perpetually youthful.
Right.
So it's been done. It's been shown that it can be done. And then when
Spider-Man too, for a while, long time,
when the author finally signs out and ends the series is done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm going to tell everybody how to win the prizes here in a second for everybody that's watching. But here, Thomas Rowley says on the message board that they spend an average of about $60 a week on comics. Now, you have a good job and everything, and that's okay. A lot of us, $60 a week is a lot of money, and I don't think the comic book companies realize that. And you could spend a lot more than $60. I mean, you could on everything you're interested in.
You could spend that on Lovecraftian books almost.
Yeah.
Hey.
I can easily spend $60 a week on Lovecraftian books.
Yeah.
No, Lovecraftian books are free, because Isabel might watch this.
They're free.
Yeah. Everything I write is free.
Well, if you want to buy, especially when we're dealing with publishers like Centipede and PS, which is a little less expensive, but one PS book, if you're ordering one PS book, it costs about $60.
Oh yeah.
Even if you order it domestically, rather than from the UK.
I'm going to make a future announcement is coming about A Lonely and Curious Country.
Yeah.
We have contacted authors. We are going to attempt to get the book out by Necronomicon. We're looking at covers. I don't have Sam's approval to release a table of contents yet because we haven't quite decided on the order of things. I'm going to release one tidbit here, though, because I don't even know if anyone else would think this is funny, but Robert Price wrote a story, and one line in that story just had me rolling on the floor, and I'm thinking, if you're not as big a Lovecraft geek as me, you probably won't even notice it, let alone think that it's funny. It's just like one throwaway line in his story. It's just a marvel. Just a little
Matt, will you talk about the 4 of the 5 prizes? The Fedogan and Bremer fungi from Yagath. We're giving away those. You've got those.
Yes. They're in my possession. The folks at FMB, Dennis Weiler, he was so nice to do this. If you haven't listened to it, it's the recording from 1986-87. I don't have it right in front of me, so I can't tell who recited it, but it was original music. And then
John Arthur with music from Mike Olson, you said.
It's beautiful. I've been listening to it when I'm driving. The music is atmospherically. The composer would listen to a sonnet, kind of sketch out ideas in his head, start putting things together, and so each piece of music was drafted to go with how the poem, not only what the words were, but how it was read. And it really, it makes it just a really stirring experience. And then they've got this bonus disc of music, which includes things like, well, everyone knows that H.P. Lovecraft wrote a drinking song. You know, it includes a version of Lovecraft's drinking song, and other music dedicated to Lovecraftian themes. It's just terrific, and it's so nice of him to make this donation so that, you know, we can pass this on to the viewers here.
Yeah, it's a deluxe 2 CD edition. Matt's doing all the work here, so I'm in the very loose sense. We're going to give away 2 to live viewers today, so, you know, I'll give out how to do that in a second. And then I know a lot of people will be watching this in the next few days who can't watch it live, and I appreciate you guys too, and we'll give away 2 of those to you guys as well, so there's 4 total. The Cthulhu action figure I'll give out to a live viewer today. So if you're watching live, send me, and you want the fungi from Yagath, send to Lovecraft eZine prizes, Lovecraft eZine prizes, PRIZES, all one word, at gmail.com. Excuse me, and put in the subject. I'll use random.org to choose someone, to choose the winners. Excuse me. I think I need another cup of coffee. Sorry.
Put in the subject what? You said put in the subject. I'll use random.org to choose.
Yeah, I think I need some more caffeine. Put fungi from Yagath in the subject. Thank you, Salome. I'm glad you're here. If that's what you're going for, and an hour or 2 from now, I will use random.org to randomly choose 2 people. If you are going for the Cthulhu action figure, put that in the subject. You can write anything you want in the body of the email, like Pete Rollick Rocks, or whatever you want to write.
Can they put, I would like $1 million in the subject line?
Write whatever you want in the body of the email. Yeah.
You can write, I wish I had Matthew Carpenter's collection.
That's right.
A collection of what? Hardening of the arteries? The other thing is, I think Hippocampus Press, I think I got this right, is finally going to be releasing, is it David Schultz's Annotated Fungi from Yagath, book 30 Years in the Making. So that's going to be coming out soonish, I hope. This would be a very nice companion to when you get that book from Hippocampus.
Yeah, you can write in the body of the email too. Thanks, Matt Carpenter, for.
No, don't thank me. It's that thanks, Fedigan, and they were the ones who gave me the discs. When I mentioned I was going to do a giveaway. No,
I was getting to that. If you read Lovecraftian fiction, you really should shop on Fedogan Bremer's. Is it Fedigan or is it Fedogan? I never can remember.
Fedogan.
Well, you should be shopping at their website. I mean, these are quality hardback Lovecraftian and horror books. They're really great. So please check out their website. And Matt's right; it's very generous of Dennis to do this.
They're the natural successor to Arkham House right now.
Yeah.
That the next thing they're putting out is that anthology. I think it is edited by Daryl Schwartz. Daryl Schweitzer. Yeah. So they've even got a new book coming out in the next week or 3.
I didn't know that.
A mythos anthology, I would imagine?
Yes. I can't open up any other windows to look at it to tell you what the title is, but it's coming, and apparently it looks great per the publisher.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever listened to that Fungi from Yagath.
I had a bootleg copy years ago.
Huh.
Well, here's a just between you and me, nudge nudge, wink wink. Have him on as a guest.
Who?
The publisher.
Dennis?
And maybe he'll slip you a copy.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've had Dennis on the show before.
Well, we can have him again, I guess, because it's been a while.
Yeah, that's true.
Been like, I think, has it been like 2 years? Seems like that.
Yeah.
God, have you been doing this that long?
Yeah, because it's been at least a year and a half, because we were in the old place. I remember in the old apartment. I was, my family. God, I need some more coffee. I'm babbling out. What's going on with Cthulhu Lies Dreaming, Salome?
Oh, here's one last thing.
Oh, okay. God damn it, Carpenter.
Sorry.
Where are you?
Hilton Head.
Where?
Hilton Head, South Carolina.
Oh, okay. Great. That's just great.
That's what Peter Ross gets every day.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
It's funny because I guess last weekend we went away and for 3 days and we went
You vacation in Akron?
No, we
You
vacationed.
get away from it all by going to Toledo?
No, we went to this place called Captiva. It's on the west coast of Florida, and it's a resort island. That the top we went to the top 5 miles, and it's all resort. And we did nothing but drink, go to the beach, and eat shrimp for 3 days. And it was the most relaxing 3 days of my life. I did not have to get in the car. We got on the trolley, and they drove us everywhere we needed to go. It was like Disney World for adults.
I'm doing something wrong. Salome, how's Cthulhu Lies Dreaming?
Well, we're editing it. We have accepted all the stories. We have all the contract signs. I'm working on edits. Gabor and I have an idea for the cover, and I have a photographer working on a photo that we want to use as the basis of it. He has been in touch with me to ask for more ideas, and I was like, well, I want you to take an awesome picture of this thing that I had sent to him by an artist. And so we'll see what happens from that. And then I'm thinking that I will be able to preview the cover to you guys on an iPad when he gets it done and we're all like agreed on it. I can show
Oh,
it.
that'd be great. What? I know you've told me this before, but when approximately will Cthulhu Lies Dreaming be out?
I have told you that we haven't chosen a date yet because it's a lot of stories and I'm waiting until I know more about the editing schedule before, because I would hate to set a date and then have to. That's happened before where I was like, oh, I'm so optimistic, we're going to get it out this time, and then I'm like, we can't get it out. So I'm trying to wait until I'm, 97% sure that that's when it can come out. Yeah. But I hope it can still come out this year. I don't know. If it doesn't come out by Thanksgiving, I'm like, really, who is going to buy a horror book at Christmas? Maybe people will, but...
Oh, you'd be surprised.
That's the only thing that's on my list.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
It's the only thing I want for Christmas is books.
Doesn't Lois Gresh have something, anthology, Lovecraftian anthology just came out?
Yeah, the Innsmouth book will be out in time. I guess it's going to debut at Necro.
Oh, okay. No,
Is that the PS Publishing one?
Yep.
Yeah, PS Publishing is putting out, I think, 2 books. I don't know. There's so many coming out, I've lost track.
We've got a Ramsey Campbell one that hopefully will make it.
Yes, that's it.
All his mythos stories.
Yeah.
Sort of visions from Brychester.
Oh my God, Laird just posted about what we were talking about. He posted a link to The Guardian that the title is "Superheroes Are a Cultural Catastrophe," says comics guru Alan Moore. Laird, now he's quoting from somebody. I don't think Laird's saying this, but I agree with it, whoever's saying it. To my mind, this embracing of what were ambiguously children's characters at their mid-20th century inception seems to indicate a retreat from the admittedly overwhelming complexities of modern existence. Oh, says, then now this is Laird talking. This is great. Says famous kook, as he promises to retreat from a public life that has made him wealthy and renowned.
You know, whoever says that hasn't read Charlie Strauss's latest book.
Moore said that, and Laird has commented.
Like he explained, in terms of a Lovecraftian universe, he explained unicorns. Then he explained vampires, and now he has explained superheroes. That's the latest. That's the Annihilation score. So,
well, I'm going to have to read that article, and so that I can find out from Alan Moore how I should be thinking about superheroes from now on.
Well, go on YouTube and search for, I don't know how easy it is to find, but I found it just by accident, and it's actually only audio of Warren Ellis giving a talk in which he mentions Alan Moore, and it's quite hilarious. Like,
I'll do that.
about talking to him on the phone and what it was like. He does an impersonation of Alan Moore, which totally cracked me up, and it might give you some insight.
In the next couple of months, well, next week, Gemma Files is going to be on the show. Then in the next few months, we've got Brian Hodge. You guys remember we had Brian Hodge on before?
Yeah.
Man, I love talking to him. He was great to talk to. That story of his, that Lovecraftian Innsmouth story, what's the name of that? Been reprinted like 5 times now.
It's in Weirder Shadows Over Innsmouth, and I can't think of the title.
Yeah, I can't. The name escapes me right now. But it's a really good story.
When you're talking about this woman goes to prison to try and communicate to Deep Ones.
Yes,
Right.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Sort of the
Beautiful story.
Guantanamo.
What?
I don't have my books in front of me. It's a gorgeous story.
It is.
It's sort of, there's been a Guantanamo Bay prison for Deep Ones for decades.
Yeah. Hold on, I'll look up. I did the review of that.
You can go to the Lovecraft eZine website, and one of the tabs at the top, Lovecraft eZine Talk Show, which you're probably watching this on right now, actually. If you scroll down, I put the list of upcoming guests on there. Brian Hodge is on the 30th of August. Then Scott Thomas the next week. I can't wait to talk to him. I never get tired of talking with Scott about the Sea of Ash. On October the 4th, Trent Zelazny is, of course, Roger Zelazny's son. He just got married yesterday, too. Trent did.
The same deep waters as you.
Yes, that's it. Great story. Pick up any Lovecraftian anthology and you can read it. So, practically. But Trent's a crime writer. He's going to talk about his work, but he's also going to talk about, he's got some great stories about when his dad was writing A Night in the Lonesome October. And actually, Laird's going to come on that show too, because Roger Zelazny's a really big influence for Laird Barron. So read him a lot growing up, from what I hear. So Laird's going to be on our. He's going to be one of us panelists that day. So okay, are we done?
Oh, I just want to mention I finally got the King in Yellow graphic novel.
Oh, how do you like it?
And I enjoyed it. It's an adaptation of the 4 stories from Chambers' books. And it's pretty faithful, though it does add a little continuity that wasn't in the original tales, but that was fine. That can make the stories work a little better. But I recommend it.
Okay. You're going to say something, Matt?
Well,
Or are you just going to show us your damn pool
when I look at the art that Ian J. Colbard does,
Mm-hmm.
the thing that he does least well is draw human faces and figures. And that's almost all of this book. So I was, you know, while the adaptations are nice, I was not enamored of the art. I preferred the art to the last book he had, which was The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath.
Yeah, he's done like 5 or 6 Lovecraftian books, and King in Yellow is just the latest, right?
Yeah, but maybe that's just an issue with the subject matter, because you don't. There's not too much graphic alien creatures in there, or there really none in The King in Yellow.
I will freely admit this is just my personal bias.
Well, you can tell him he's going to be on the show on October the 18th. So.
But what I'll do is I'll tell him I really loved his drawing of Nyarlathotep because it was gorgeous.
But you know, all you get. I mean, other than The King in Yellow, who you really can't do much with because he really didn't make an appearance in the story.
No, the actual picture of the King in Yellow was gorgeous.
I mean, I'm just saying, there's not. You can't really do any strange. I mean, you can't really draw the Phantom of Truth. I guess you could, but I mean, you just have references to a lot of weird stuff in the original stories and no descriptions or appearances by supernatural creatures, other than or any that do appear, like the Night Watchman and the Yellow Sign were very human.
Well, I think we're all in agreement that all the graphic novels that he's done, the Lovecraftian graphic novels, are definitely worth buying. I mean, they've done Mountains of Madness. What else have they done besides this King in Yellow and
The Shadow Out of Time? And
right.
Did a really wonderful adaptation of The Case of Charles Dexter Ward. That might be my favorite.
So, yeah, he'll be on the show too. So, anyway, thanks, guys. Matt, I'm sorry you're having to deal with what you're having to deal with this weekend, and I hope you get through it okay.
I'll make it.
It was horrible having this wonderful vacation.
It was horrible. What was?
Him having this wonderful vacation.
Yeah.
South Carolina.
You'll need another vacation from your vacation when you get home.
I find that that's actually useful. Every once in a while, I give myself an extra day or two just to decompress from the vacation. Get back into the idea of actually having to go back to the day job.
Yeah, in the old days I used to go directly.
After the last couple of weeks at work, I really needed this. That's all I can say.
If I travel on from a vacation, I generally have one day which is just free for me at home, just to recover and then get back to work.
Yeah. Well, anyway, again, let me repeat the email address for the prizes. Please don't send it to the main email address. That'll just clutter up the inbox. Lovecraft eZine prizes at gmail.com, and I'll do that giveaway in an hour or two, and I will do another giveaway on Wednesday for those of you who are watching this later, and I really appreciate all of you who are watching, and thanks guys for being on the show. Salome, Pete, Rick, appreciate it. So
Good night.
we will see you next week.